think people don't understand how powerful that is. Peer pressure, they've done tons of studies on this stuff. So even if you, like, for example, you're representing somebody who's innocent, and you have two people out of 11 that think you're right, right? Attorney Zambrano is representing an innocent man that should not be executed, right? But if among those other nine, there's two or three or four other people that are very persuasive, that are very alpha, very dominating, very intimidating, people don't understand how easy it could, because you're locked up in that little tiny room and it's all of you together and you can't go anywhere and you're missing your family and you're missing, like, there's all this, right? Their lives are going on and they want to be done with this. And they get locked up in these rooms for days and weeks and sometimes months. And it'd be very easy for these other nine people to slowly persuade the other people, not because they're right, but because that's just, I mean, some
external circumstances, exactly. The pressure, they don't want to be there anymore. They want it to be over. Nobody, like, everyone's tired, right? You listen to hearings, like extensive hearings as a non-legal professional, right? It's extremely tiring for people that that haven't chosen this, because it's a duty that you have to do in the US. It's not that you say, oh my God, I want to do that, right? Or I cannot wait. You have to sometimes get off work for all these weeks. You cannot come home, right? You cannot exchange communication with anyone. You're not allowed to watch the TV, to listen to the radio, right? All these things that are limiting your life for this certain time of period. So, but also what I wanted to say is that if you have a good and motivated defense attorney, he will attack those jury members, right, in the beginning, that he sees, there's a lot of investigation going on in the law firm, that, the legal professionals, the paralegals have to, search for everything. Like, did this person post something on their social network, right? Against Latinos, against Blacks, against, you have to remove this person from the jury, right? Or did this person, you will find so many things to at least erase those that are biased, right? Or they had a similar case, or if it was something about, sexual assault, you can, try to remove those who were victims before, right? Because you cannot have those people in an unbiased jury. So a good defense attorney who is who is compensated accordingly, because it's a lot of work, right? Will take the time and have, the whole team of his office look into the things, right? Be like private investigators almost. Look through everyone's history, right? Do they have, a similar history? Were they victims? Do they have any preferences, right? Regarding race, regarding, that's important. That's very important. And also, you can also reject judges, right? If you have a judge that you see, okay, he has a social media, right? So he's posting like a lot of things. That's amazing for the defense attorney, because you can pick and say, this person already had a certain preference or prejudice against a certain group of people, and the defendant belongs to this kind of group, right? So you can, you just have to be open-minded, right? And then try to do the best that you can do for your client, right? But if you get a public defender and he gets paid by the government, by the court, it's highly unlikely that this person is going to put so much love and passion into something and, cannot take on other cases in the meantime, right? How is this person going to, pay his employees, right? Or continue working as an attorney if that takes sometimes years or at least months. So it's not fair, right? I think public defenders should be compensated much better, right? So that a suspect who cannot afford a private attorney, right, who cannot pay for it, has the same chances, right, and has the same access to a fair trial than someone that, has just like a lot of savings or has money to pay it.
Right. I agree completely. So do you find that that's the case, both that disparity, right, in resources allocated towards public defenders? Do you find that that's a similarity or a dissimilarity between the American criminal justice system and then in Germany?
That's pretty similar. I would say pretty similar. It's not that public defenders, I know in the US they have a bad reputation in general, right? because everyone knows they're not putting in, their motivational, the most motivational time and, and dedication. In Germany, like they get also not compensated well, right, for those cases. But I would say they're still, they are still criminal defense attorneys who have cases that are very well compensated. And then they have one or two cases that they have to take on, right, and get paid by the court. So they're still as motivated, right, because they still can, compensate with other cases. And not like public defenders in the States who only get those kind of cases, right, and don't get paid throughout all these cases.
Right, right. And in all fairness, and that's one of the things that I cover in my content too, is there are exceptions. There are public defenders that are really good. I know that, yeah, there's definitely exceptions. There's public defenders that, my hat's off to them. They do a phenomenal job. They, I know of a handful here locally that have had some big victories, some big wins for their clients. So there's definitely exceptions, but generally speaking, that's not the case. And I think it does traces back to the money. And it's unfortunate. So, here in the US, we can do what's called, and I'm curious to know if you also have that in Germany, you can do on a federal level, it's called a FOIA. And then at the state level here, it's called a grandma request. But essentially what it comes down to is where you can request any government record. And I've used that to request the contracts that the public defenders have with the county. And, the numbers are still in the millions, but it's millions over, it's a few $1 million a year. But if you break up the number of cases that they have, all the overhead, all the private investigators, I mean, you just take everything into account. It really is, it's a flimsy contract. It really is not enough money that's been allocated to defend not hundreds, but thousands of people. If you do the numbers, right, they get paid just hypothetically, right? Because the one that I did the grandma request is a little bit older. It was $4 million. But if you divide that over, let's say, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 cases that they have in a year, really the county is only allocating a very small, almost insignificant amount per person. And that's why they cannot allocate all their heart and soul and their passion to really fighting for every single person that they believe is innocent,
Yes, but usually that's how it is. In Germany, the defense attorney, right, is requesting all the files. It's requesting the protocols from the police, from the first investigation, right? It's requesting all the witnesses, all the files, all the statements that witnesses have done, right, have made in this case. Anything that was found, right? Evidence that was found. Everything is being requested before the trial starts, right? So you're perfectly prepared for the worst case, right? And then you have to actually step in and try to cross-examine, the law enforcement officer that was first on the crime scene, for example, right? So that is like the goal of a defense attorney, right? In that case, that you do not have to prove that your client is innocent. You have to just create or try to create, the scenario that my client is not the only one here, right? There are certain elements that are still not proven, right?
Yeah.
So if the DNA is contaminated, for example, right? Or if there was not, the weapon was not found, right? All these traces, or you cannot trace the DNA of the client to the crime scene, or there were a lot of different traces. So you just have to open the case to more suspects, right? Because in a lot of cases we see, I think in the US as well, but especially in Germany, that the law enforcement officers who try to do a good job, there are a lot of amazing law enforcement officers, but also some that just try to focus, right, on the first person that that could have a motive, right? So, and then they focus on this person like an eagle, right? You cannot and do not really investigate in more in the environment of this person, right? Because sometimes motives are extremely diverse. It's not always about the family, extended family, or extended workforce, right? There's more to it. There are random crimes, right? There are crimes without a clear motive, or without any motivation in the first place. So it's at least, I think it's the same in the US as well, that you have, one main suspect, and there's, in rare cases, that the police investigates further to see, do we have other suspects? Because if they have a great defense attorney, then this defense attorney will create the scenario and say, okay, they did not even look into it, right? They did not even make any other research. He was presented as a main suspect. And it's not the investigation they should have done, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And as you're talking about this, it's bringing up all these emotions, because it reminds me of a gentleman that I know personally. We were with one of my former partners. We were trying to help him out, and he was already incarcerated for over 20 years. And it was interesting. He was the prime suspect when the crime first happened. They thoroughly investigated him. They did everything possible, right? And those were good police officers, and they determined, no, like, there's no way, like, it's, even though he was the prime suspect, there's no way this guy did it. So they closed the case. Well, they put him off to the side. There's no way he did it. Like, it's more than obvious, right? He didn't do it, even though he was the prime suspect. And they keep working on the case. A few months or a few years go by. They close the case. New officer comes on board 10 years later, right from the time of the crime. And he wants to make a name for himself. And he's got all this pressure that, hey, look, it's been 10 years. We have a cold case. And he decides he's going to reopen the file. He's going to go ahead and make the same guy the prime suspect. But this time he's going to ignore all the evidence that they had, all the stuff that they found at the time of the crime, the night of the crime, and shortly thereafter. He's going to ignore all of the evidence that makes it clear he's not guilty. And he's going to focus only on the circumstantial evidence, which is real flimsy. But it was enough. It was enough that he took, he was able to get first-degree murder charges put on this guy. They took him to trial. They convicted him, and he spent over 20 years in prison. And it was, like you said, it was one of those officers. There's no integrity. There's no principles, values. I mean, or not good values, at least. But he was able to successfully. This new police officer came on board, was able to successfully convict an innocent man, like, and took most of his life away, most of his adult life.
Yeah, but I believe also that, if I'm not mistaken, I read that the U.S. is one of the countries with the highest wrongful conviction rates, actually. What is a little bit surprising, because we think that, it's the oldest democratic system, right? It's the oldest legal system that is still in place. A lot of countries copied the system, actually. UK, Germany has a lot of those principles from the American system, right? So it's a little bit surprising that, the first world country and the biggest and the most modern society in the world has one of the highest, or if not the highest, wrongful conviction rates. That's possibly also because, there's just so much going on. Like, you have certain judges and prosecutors got a certain time to do, the prosecutor to do the investigation, right? And the longer you take, the more likely it is that it becomes a cold case, right? And that's the nightmare for every law enforcement officer, right? To have cold cases that you couldn't solve, that you have to leave to your colleague, right?
Yeah, and honestly, despite the fact that it's got some areas that are flawed, I still think it can be improved significantly with just a few tweaks. We'll have to leave that for another conversation, but maybe just a few thoughts, as we wrap up, just some few thoughts on that. Do you think it's hopeless? There's no way to fix the American criminal justice system? I mean, you live here. I mean, if you're going to raise a family here, that's important, right? So just speaking strictly about the US, do you think that the system could be fixed, or would easily it'd be a lot of work, or just it's a lost case?
So I believe, so the US, like, for me, the best country in the world. You can say there are, like, a lot of things that are not as they should be, right? Because the standard should be much higher. The standard is extremely high, right? If you compare it to other countries, but in a lot of areas, you're surprised by also the criminal justice system. You're surprised how a lot of these things can happen in the first place, right? Wrongful convictions, right? You have, amazing laws, right? And how could you just turn it against someone when this person cannot be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, for example? So I believe there's a lot of potential. So what I think is that there's a lack in employees, especially in the criminal justice system, right? So the courts don't have enough people, right, that are working on cases. The also correction officers, like there's a huge lack of those kind of people, right? To make it fairer, to make it safer in prisons, right? So that can be done, right? That's not something impossible. So there's an amazing system in place. It's just there are so many loopholes that if you want to, you have a way, right, to get away with something, or to you turn it against someone, right? So I believe if you if you support it more, like financially, right, the government has to support institutions more, the criminal law system, and also prisons, right, to prepare prisons to help someone that has been convicted, right, to get out sooner, right, to get a job, right, to start their life again. So it's almost like when I see people that were convicted, it came out, all of them were by themselves, right? So either way you make it, right, you're intelligent enough, you're motivated enough, you're ambitious enough, or you're not, right? There are no other, there's only one or the other. It's like most people are struggling forever, right? They can never get back the life they had before, right? So it's extremely, I think the system is just extremely tends to self-responsibility and freedom. And the government does not take care of individuals. You can say that's amazing, right? I don't want to have, any government involved in my life, right? Others may need governmental help for a certain period of time, right, to get on track, to get back on track. So I believe it's a financial problem that obviously it's not the highest priority because the money is there, right? You could easily put more finances into those kind of areas, right, into the legal system, into prisons, into also to reintegrate convicted people, right, into society back again. But those programs are not as good or not as common, and to find people working in those areas, they're just paid not well, right? So how can you just we wouldn't do the work, right? We wouldn't do the work in those kind of areas, because if you have the choice, you would do your own thing, right? You would try to build your own business and work for, and not work for someone and get paid, for all these hours and overtime, right? So I think it's a financial problem, but it's not something cannot be fixed, because it's like the Constitution is amazing, right? The Constitution is an amazing, it's one of its kind, right? It's not surprising that a lot of countries copied it. So the foundation is there, but I believe due to financial problem, like financial reasons, we have this lack and this this gap between justice and injustice in a lot of places.
Yeah, yeah. You touched on so many great points, and we're definitely going to have to, in the next parts that we're going to do, we're going to have to talk about some of those. One final thing I'd like to point out, just to corroborate and support what you just said right there, because you made so many great points. But one thing that came to mind is you're talking about people getting out and having the support. I'd like to just kind of point out for our audience, some of the ridiculous things that one of the ridiculous things that exist. And it's that, for example, here in Utah, and I'm sure, in other states is similar. They, for somebody who's been incarcerated for longer than, I don't know what it is, 6 months, a year, they have this thing called the gate pass, right? They give the inmate $200, which I think is ridiculous. $200 is nothing. I mean, like, that pays for what, 2 days at a motel, or 3 days at a motel, and what about food? And so, what I mean? So that's number one. But here's the kicker. This is what makes it interesting. It's not that they're given $200, is when you realize that the prisons will fight, and they have all these rules to do everything possible to not give this inmate the $200. They have all these silly little rules. Well, you get it, but except if this or if this, and if this happens, if that happens, if you had $20 in your books, or if you had more than $9 in the last 45 days, you don't get anything. In prisons that make, they get funded, right? Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes every year to run these operations. And the cost to taxpayers is what, different studies say different numbers, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. And instead of giving somebody the $200, like the prisons will go out of their way to not give that person a fighting chance, not even enough for food when they get out.
Yeah.
They will fight to not give that $200. Like the irony of that, the how ludicrous that is just mind blowing to me.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, but Vera, we are out of time. It's been a pleasure again. Thank you for being on the show. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you? I mean, you're a practicing attorney. You're good at what you do. How can they get a hold of you?
Yes, you can contact us via email, right? You can reach us via phone. Look up the website, law firm Vera, Zambrano and Associates. The email is info@lawyer-berlin-miami.com. Yes, I believe you can just, Google it online. We have a lot of presence. We have a lot of legal blogs, right, to read for free. So a lot about our criminal justice system as well in criminal cases. So, educate yourself, and, we would like to also encourage people to reach out, to us, to you or to me, and also leave their questions. If they have any questions about it, or say that was not clear, can you explain again, or, or they see it completely different, right? We highly encourage people to reach out and to have a discussion about it, and maybe we can pick up next time on that questions.
Yeah, we have, in fact, we've gotten a lot of emails, right, from from the last one that we did, the last podcast. So I'd love to be able to address some of those questions. We just barely scratched the surface on this. So I'm looking forward to our next one. Thank you again. And I'm looking forward to our next one.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
You.
Yeah, and don't forget, everyone, share this content with your friends. Let's make a difference. Let's make a difference. Enough is enough. Let's get the word out there, right? We're going to try to continue producing good content and give you some insight, right, into how we can improve our system. And just share it with your friends and give us a thumbs up. So thank you.
Thank you so much.